Hey everyone, it is Peerless. Welcome back. Today we are going to be going over DMT, the Spirit Molecule, by Rick Strassman, MD. This is a very interesting book, sticking in the lines of our nonfiction. It's basically going over a doctor's use of how he tried to normalize DMT research. There was a point where LSD and other psychoactive drugs were being researched very heavily, and eventually a big fear came along that did not allow them to do so. So the book, first part of it, is going to document him trying to go and actually find a way to legitimize these testings, and it documents all the hoops and the large amount of things he had to go through in order to start this research. The rest of the book then focuses on the research itself, and that's where things really get interesting. The second half of the book is then going to focus on the actual tests themselves, of him sitting down with subjects, giving them varying levels of drugs. At first, the first few levels of drugs don't have any effect on them, and as he ups the doses, or even does multiple doses in one session, these people start to really break off into very psychoactive worlds that are quite abnormal to anything that we would describe. They believe a sense of oneness is coming over them often, a sense of interdimensional beings contacting to them, or doing things much worse than simply mere contact with them. And of course, the research wasn't done just for the purpose of trying to find extra dimensional beings. That didn't have anything to do with the research at all. While it was a certain point of interest for Strassman, the main thing he wanted to do is find if there was therapeutic uses for DMT in helping people recover. In the long and short of things, it turns out he does not believe that there is any actual benefit to human beings doing DMT. Everyone who had something that they described as a life-changing experience, be it through communicating with a higher being or a feeling of oneness with the universe, within a few months' time when he talked to them again, they seemed to be back to normal, didn't have much memory of these instances or much effect of them in their everyday life. So he ended up trying to call this experiment a failure as a result of that. So while from a scientific standpoint of what he was trying to accomplish, Strassman does call that a failure, but it does end up raising some very interesting questions. One main one for me is, are we alone in the universe? Book doesn't give you any type of definitive answer of are these beings from our own mind, our own creation, our own psychology, and we're just tapping into that in a different way, or if they are actual beings in another dimension, and through this DMT drug is the only way to reach and contact them, which is an absolutely fascinating concept, definitely worth exploring. The book does mention that there are specifically DMT receptors in the brain that are made for nothing else but to receive DMT. And of course, when it does receive the DMT, you are sent into these mystical realms. So it does lead to question that perhaps space travel isn't the way to meet other beings, but is actually through the power of our own mind, and that through tearing through these different layers of consciousness, that we would be able to travel and communicate with other beings, even though if our physical bodies couldn't quite be there, which is actually a kind of terrifying concept to think that all of these other beings and all of these other life forms are completely at our fingertips, but just out of our grasp. The book does not have a single aha moment that's going to lead you to any definitive answer, but if you are interested in the subject, are interested in psycho drugs or interdimensional beings, or even just the bureaucracy that's preventing researchers from researching these types of things, the book is very well written. It covers all of those issues very well, and is definitely worth the read and worth your time to put into it. And there's a reason why it's kind of become part of our zeitgeist that the DMT is a spirit molecule that they believe, comes into our body once we're born and leaves only when we die, and that is this idea of us traveling into these other dimensions and through one life into the next. Is a very fascinating concept, and if you're trying to look into it, then this is absolutely a great route to start. An interesting sub-story that brings itself up in the book is one of the researchers he was doing it, kind of starting to break a lot of the rules of the research and trying to find himself into these other test subjects' lives, trying to do basically drugs with them. And I think that, while maybe not intending to be, is a real warning of how, while everything Strassman did was very scientific and done in a very controlled setting, that you shouldn't start experimenting with these drugs on your own, especially if it's going to jeopardize the entire project that you've been working on to legitimately study these things. And I also think that that's a very strong note that this book isn't really condoning or trying to glorify psycho drug use. It's actually just trying to build a case from a scientific standpoint, and he lays things out in a very bare, very frank manner. Sometimes it doesn't make him look good, sometimes it doesn't make the research look very good, and that's why I find a lot of truth in it, because when you're trying to sell a bunch of poppycock, you're not going to put in things that make you personally look bad or could possibly put you at risk. So I think the author had a lot of integrity, not just in his research, but in then writing this book and condoning it for mass consumption for the public mind. I find the subject infinitely fascinating. I find the book to cover it very well. Strassman's done an amazing job of it. Again, that is DMT, The Spirit Molecule by Rick Strassman, MD. So that's going to be all for today. We'll look forward to talking to you next time. This is Peerless. See ya.